What is happening out there, rotoscouts basketball fans? What's going on, gang? Good crowd already here. Starting up a couple minutes late. Apologies. Just trying to get the spreadsheet in order. Make sure that all the columns fit on the screen and so on and so forth. Just trying to see if I could fit it into and make it just so that it zoomed in a little bit better, looked a little clearer, but got a little sidetracked. Missed the start time by about 2 or 3 minutes, but I appreciate everybody hanging out. Beantown's here. Special thanks to Beantown. Sent me some cool graphics that I got to get up and running for the show here. But really appreciate that. Nice, unnecessary but appreciated effort on Beantown's part, so thank you for that. MSH is here. What's going on? EB. What's going on, EB? Stephen Leibowitz. Chaos Night. Yeah, some teams on back-to-backs. Already got some news in. Got some players out. Got some players in. Should be an interesting one. Life of... interesting name. Thank you for the content, Life. Appreciate that. Fanatics here. Jake Swales is here early. What's going on, Jake? Good to see Jake here at start time rather than crashing in late and trying to catch up. Always better to get everything up front. Just going to jump right to the board. It is definitely a night with a lot going on. 8-gamer, a little bit smaller than last night. But some key pieces. A few things we know already. A few things we're not entirely sure of. Key questionables as of the 3:30 injury report. Kyrie, big question mark in the Dallas game. Outside of that, he's the only questionable one there, missing Maxi Kleber, but that's been in the last few games. Dylan Wright out on the other side. Celtics and Sixers has a few really big question marks. Jaylen Brown and KP both questionable for the Celtics. Nick Batum already ruled out for the Sixers. Kelly Oubre, of course, out after getting hit by the car. But Tobias Harris is probable. Joel Embiid came up questionable, which is a big obstacle, obviously. Second night of a back-to-back for them. Had the disappointing Covington night last night that we talked about during the day. Looked unavoidable going in, but man, that was Rocco night after all. But big question marks in that Boston and Philly game. Giannis already being ruled out is a monster piece of news. Sends Dame Lillard to kind of the top of the board on both sites in a lot of ways. Getting some interesting values, I'm sure. I haven't looked through the individual sim results, but I'm sure we'll see some value on like Bobby Portis gaining minutes. Maybe Brolo at one of the center spots as a little value play. So there'll probably be some action coming out of that game. On the Toronto side, Jay Crowder also still out for Milwaukee, of course. On the Toronto side, OG doubtful, most likely not going. Dennis Schroeder came up questionable. Gary Trent doubtful. For the Knicks, RJ Barrett questionable. That just creates that normal, consolidation of that Knicks rotation. Nothing important on the Atlanta side. Markelle Fultz already out. Gary Harris already announced available, so we know those two pieces on the Orlando rotation. Alex Caruso questionable for Chicago. We already know that DeMar DeRozan is out. We had that early today. Patrick Williams is probable. Seems like he's going to play. Bradley Beal and Devin Booker both supposed to play. Like they're listed as probable, but all reporting is that they're expected to play. Eric Gordon also probable in that game. Darius Garland out for Cleveland is a biggie. Who else? There's a couple other guys that aren't. What's an interesting one is not listed. At this point, I should probably put him in. I wasn't expecting Jonathan Isaac, but they haven't had him listed all day. Unless he pops up in the next little bit, might have to stick him in for some minutes. The reason that popped into my head is just because I just read the name Isaac Okoro, who is out for Cleveland. Their usual guys out, though, outside of Darius Garland. That's been the case for the last few games. It's 10 o'clock. Oh, this one's tomorrow. I hate that the tomorrow game is at the bottom of the injury report. I always run into it, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? Did I miss something? So some interesting ones there. The Lakers had not released anything as of the 3:30, but keep an eye on AD and LeBron. Obviously, those were question marks yesterday. Question marks again today. So that'll be a biggie. Right now, I've got them both in. But some obviously very, very big pieces of news yet to drop onto this slate and could create some total chaos and a lot of value in a lot of different directions. But we'll get into what we already know. Jake Swales nails it. Fuck the Warriors. Can't believe I've seen a top 10 point guard in the league list that had Steph Curry number 1, Noah Alex number 1 point guard in the league at 35 years old. I didn't know that's where he was going. I thought you were going to be mad at the Warriors about getting 2 of their key players ejected, having somebody that 99% of people playing in last night's tournament probably never heard of going off. Yeah, it was an interesting game. Curious to see how many games Draymond gets. Did you guys see the clip that was going around of the one of the Warriors announcers basically like, and Draymond coming in to cool things off, cooler heads prevailing, as Draymond's got him hauling him off to just eat him alive. That was monstrous. Can't say that a lot of the world didn't want to do that to Rudy Gobert a couple years ago though, so you can kind of understand it. Stephen Lewis, Embiid questionable yesterday, also went, but coming into today, second game of a back-to-back, obviously a key game, but it might be a little bit of gamesmanship on both sides where they're all going to play and nothing matters, or it might be a little bit of like who blinks first, and if those guys sit, he'll sit. I could see it going that route, which would suck, and which is exactly what the NBA doesn't want in kind of a featured Eastern Conference game, but is what it is. Let's get into some of the key pieces. We'll go, as usual, by DraftKings win rates. We'll just start at the top of the board. I didn't take out the blanks. Always something. I left the zeros off the table today, but I forgot to take out the blanks. So like I said, Dame Lillard just looks phenomenal at the top of the board on both sites. Roughly a 50-point projection across the board, only 8,100 on the FanDuel slate. 9,000 on DK, still hitting the board really hard 40% of the time in top lineups over there. Just going to have free reign to do basically whatever in that Milwaukee rotation with no Giannis there. So I really like that spot. As predicted, here's Bobby Portis popping up. We've all, hopefully anyway, made money on Bobby Portis days where he's just generally cheap like this, steps into starting minutes, and is just a very productive player. When he gets minutes, he is a hyper-productive guy. 25.5 minutes the last time out, 37 FanDuel points. With upside beyond that, because we've got him projected at 30 minutes. It's a really good buy for 5,700 on either site. Power forward and center on both sites, 33% of the time in winners on DraftKings, roughly 30% of the time in winners on FanDuel. Denny Avdija is still cheap, 1.02 FanDuel points per minute, landing in top lineups nearly half the time at small forward, power forward over there. 30-ish% of the time, small forward, power forward on the DraftKings slate. Donovan Mitchell looking like a key spend-up guy. Several $3,000 guys. Who are these? Patty Williams and MarJon Beauchamp. MarJon Beauchamp picking up, that's a pretty healthy minutes projection. There's just minutes to go around up there. You're talking about a .68 FanDuel point per minute player, .73 DraftKings point per minute player right now. But the way those guys have been hitting the board, I think he's going to be relevant going in. Patty Williams a little bit more comfy, but .68 DraftKings .71 FanDuel points per minute. Did give us 34.6 FanDuel points in 27.3 minutes the last time out. So we know there's a little bit more upside there for Pat Williams, assuming that he plays, assuming he's getting 30 minutes and starting. A lot of chaos in Chicago right now. My mic sounds weird? Let's see if I... How about now? Any better? I just move the cable around a little bit. Let me know if it still sounds weird. Might have bumped into it the wrong way. Maybe I got this turned up too high. How about now? Let me know. I almost said give me some feedback, but that would have been really cheesy. Glad I swerved. Brook Lopez, another piece of that Milwaukee rotation, picking up a couple of extra minutes. Not really hammering the gas down and pushing Brook into the mid-30s or anything, but I think realistically 30 minutes. Played 29 the last time out, 24 fantasy points, not great. Dell says sounds good. Paul C points out Jaylen Brown wasn't at shoot around. Seems more like he's going to not go. And then you're saying that it sounded like KP will play. I didn't catch any trend on KP one way or the other, but yeah, good info. Always something to keep an eye on. Malcolm Brogdon was confirmed out before the show started, by the way. I didn't mention him before. I had him out already. I wasn't expecting him at all, so that was how we were projected all day. So actually didn't talk about the game environments. Another day with some fairly healthy ones, including a monster, the Dallas and Washington game, and we're seeing some components of that game landing on the board. 245.5 point total the last time I updated. I need to do a background update before I update the projections again. I can actually pull up Pinnacle and we'll just read it off of there. Why go to the spreadsheet when I can just read the live line? 244.5. All right, close enough. 5.5 point spread. Dallas obviously favored over Washington, but that's a wide open one. Plenty of opportunity there. Kyrie questionable. Could create some havoc in that one if he doesn't play. If he does, you've got the two obvious pay-up options and some spare parts, and then you've got a bunch of interesting pieces like Danny Avdija on the at the top of the board here on the Washington side. Jordan Poole hitting from the Washington side. Corey Kispert hitting from Washington. Kuz. And then it becomes Daniel Gafford night, of course. And you don't get any of these other guys. It's probably the way it'll go. Where is Gafford? All the way down here. Not showing value on either site. It'll definitely be another stupid Daniel Gafford day like this. Anyway, so that game's a big target, that Dallas-Washington game early. Milwaukee and Toronto, at this point, just for a lot of those value plays, is going to be fairly critical. Boston and the Sixers, depends on what happens with the players in the starting lineups. You're either going there for pay-up kind of stars, just as who they are in mid-range kind of probabilities, or you'll get some pretty strong value plays there. Knicks and the Hawks could present some interesting plays. Obviously, you've got some Starsy kind of guys there. 230.5 point total. Close game, just a 1 point spread. So that one's kind of interesting. The Magic and the Bulls is ugly. 1.5 point spread, but just a 216 total. 225 between Minnesota and Phoenix. Sacramento and the Lakers checking in at 235.5 is another one. That's probably the late night target. Cleveland and Portland, a lot of value plays on the board again, but a 10.5 point spread, 218.5 point total. That's a kind of a trending downward spot from where we saw Portland last night. So it'll be an interesting slate in terms of what the game environments look like. Jake says, sounds like a little reverb going on. Yeah, it might have Joker blast his way through that under the desk part where the cable goes. So there's a chance that he just slammed into it and didn't just widen my nose. There's a chance that he just banged into the cable and knocked it a little loose. So I'll jump down there later on and kind of give it a little shake. It'll probably get back in there. Is it like tragically bad? Is it like interfering with the show? Or is it like tolerable, just annoying? I'm willing to annoy you guys, but if you can't hear me at all, we should probably take a second and fix it. Let's get into some of the positions here. And again, we're just going to see a lot of these guys come through from those high-end game environments and from those clear value spots. It is interesting here, top of the board actually, though, despite what I just said about Cleveland and Portland, that fairly low-end total. Caris LeVert and Donovan Mitchell both look great. They're both projected out strongly, but they're both landing on the board very well. 30% of the time from Mitchell, 45% of the time in winners for Caris LeVert on FanDuel, 34 and 26% of the time. Not really off of like what their current year production looks like. Fantasy point per minute out of LeVert, 1.34 per minute out of Donovan Mitchell. Right now I've got those guys. They're not going to be far off their season-long numbers. I've got Mitchell at 132. So I've got him slightly behind, which makes sense. And then Levert got a little bit further behind. So both of these guys could technically be projected a little bit higher based on what they've done so far this season. But I like them where they're at, and that keeps them very, very relevant on both sites in these sims. Zach LaVine comes up pretty strong. A lot of word about him could potentially coming to the Knicks. I'm not sure how to feel about that one. I like Zach LaVine in a vacuum. I just don't know that he's the right fit for this Knicks team. At a certain point, somebody's got to play some defense, and I think if you add Zach LaVine to this equation, it's just going to drive Tibbs completely insane. Especially if they deal a player that he really likes and a guy that's all like defense and heart. Oh, damn it. A guy that's all defense and passion in Josh Hart, who's a rumored part of that package. Not that Hart is a guy that would stop you from trying to acquire a player like Zach LaVine by any means. But for Tibbs, that would be, he would view that as a downgrade, despite how good a scorer Zach LaVine is. He does not play much defense. Plugging him in next to Jalen Brunson is problematic. So I don't know that I love that trade. I don't know that they have to jump at the first star that's comes available. I do think they're a player and a half away, but it's got to be the right guy. Just because a guy's a star doesn't mean he's necessarily the right fit. But for us, for our purposes tonight at 7,900, Zach LaVine's a pretty good fit. FanDuel slate 20% of the time in winners, a little bit more than that on the DraftKings slate for 77. Shooting guard and small forward, I love the dual eligibility across those two positions, and where you can spread them out. You can get them at forward and at the guard spot. The forward only, the guard only spots. You can get them at both of the positional spots. It's great. A lot of flex in having those multi-positions across those two. Jordan Poole out of that Washington and Dallas game, 27.5% of the time in top ones on FanDuel, 20.7% of the time in top ones on DraftKings at 6,800. Solid projection, 0.98 DraftKings points per minute. Believe is projected out. That rates out to a little bit higher in that game environment. With that many points on the board, it makes a ton of sense. Corey Kispert, 4,200. Not really involved on the FanDuel slate, but on DraftKings comes up in the mid-teens at 4,000. Just one of those guys that's going to hit the board because of how low priced he is. 4.63 points per dollar. Not the greatest buy in the world. Only 0.77 DraftKings points per minute. But on a day like today, that's fitting in fairly well, given the positioning and just that square at 4,000. If you're not going to the $3,500 Marjon Beauchamp play at the top, he's your next man up. So as we've talked about a bunch of times, when you go to these, it's just about it enables you to buy like a Donovan Mitchell. A lot of value on the board today, though. Might not be the best spot to grab it because there are a lot of 64, 91, 9,000, 77. There are a lot of decently highly priced guards on this DraftKings slate that are landing as pretty relevant and more relevant than him. Timmy Hardaway might see a little bit of an uptick if Kyrie doesn't go. Right now he's landing on the board in the mid-teens. 28 minutes, he's a sub-fantasy point per minute player, 0.87 on FanDuel, 0.95 on DraftKings so far this year. I like him a little bit better on DraftKings for the added per minute upside. 5,900 across shooting guard and small forward versus 5,300 at shooting guard small forward on FanDuel, though. There's a little more points per dollar value, obviously, on FanDuel. Only 4.39 points per dollar on DraftKings. You can see that's still landing okay. I'm surprised at that low a points per dollar mark that he's landing like that, honestly. Kyrie looks perfectly fine, perfectly playable across both sites. Better on FanDuel, where he's 20% plus. He actually looks really good at 8,600 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, where he's 88 across both guard spots, looks very good and playable, but not like a killer play like he does on FanDuel. All you got to do is get him out there. 1.24 FanDuel points per minute so far on the season. Last time out, just 27.4 FanDuel points, but that only came in 25.8 minutes. Jalen putting up around a point per minute right now. Upside beyond that. Get him in the right game. I don't know necessarily that this is the ideal spot, but even at these projections, a little bit over a point per minute. 39 points in 35. So we're giving him a little bit better than what he's done on the season. Where are we at? Knicks Yeah, Nick's picking up a few possessions in this game. So it makes sense to have him a little bit over. I've got him at... yeah, 1 and change. Randall, same story. Little slight uptick over where he's at. We'll get to him in a minute. They'll each gain a tiny sliver if RJ doesn't play. And then we'll give minutes to Josh Hart. If RJ doesn't play, presumably he steps into the starting lineup again. IQ will go from like 23 minutes and presumably down here somewhere. Yeah, like IQ's all the way down here. He'll pick up 5 minutes and 4.5 fantasy points. He'll be more relevant than this, but not like crazy relevant. He could definitely in 28 minutes go out there and bend the slate a little bit if he has one of those the floaters are dropping and quickly he's having a day kind of days. But the minutes are not necessarily going in his direction. So I don't love dashing it quickly. I think everybody realized that the last time around. Where is Josh Hart? Oh, is he a forward only on DraftKings? Yeah, Hart's down here. Shooting guard, small forward on FanDuel at 53. Small forward, power forward on DraftKings. Another guy doesn't really land relevant right now with a 26-minute projection. Just kind of an is who he is mark. But he played 43 minutes the other night, put up 32 FanDuel points. 0.72 FanDuel points per minute. But in the situation where RJ doesn't go, and he would only tick up to, I'm not going to project him at 43 minutes, but he would jump to 32, assuming he gets the start again, he would become a little bit more relevant to the slate. He would end up in the high single digits, probably, the 8-9 kind of a range on FanDuel. Same story over here. A little bit less so on DraftKings for the higher price and positioning. 53 on FanDuel, he'll have a little bit more value. Just keep an eye on how it projects out and how it lands in. Wherever it lands in your optimizers and sims is probably about the right spot to have Josh Hart. I don't think anybody's going to have him get crazy projected. I know I won't. So I wouldn't expect to get carried away with Josh Hart, no matter what happens with that situation. That was all just spinning off of, I guess, Jalen Brunson was where I was talking from. Alex Caruso is going to play. Minimal value, single-digit value on both sites in the winning lineups. Not a ton down the board to really love. Like Shaedon Sharp, 7,300 on FanDuel, 15% of the time. On DraftKings, sub 10% now. 7,800, the price has just gone up. Cole Anthony just lands like who he is on both sites. Mid-single digits. Dennis Schroeder, I've got him in. I am not seeing him like we got him the other day, fortunately. If he doesn't play, that creates some havoc there. So that's another spot to watch. Scotty Barnes looks a little bit strong. Just 3% of the time, but in terms of one of your raw projected guys that I think you can always go to, and potentially, given what he's doing so far this season, 1.31 DraftKings points per minute, 1.34 FanDuel points per minute. Regardless of where it rates out, I do think, at least on DraftKings, he might still be a couple bucks cheap if that kind of a trend continues. Like for 91, you're getting 135. So that's, 131? Reasonably close. So maybe it's about right. Getting 135 for 8,300 out of De'Aaron Fox is interesting. He didn't really land well at all, though. That might just be a case of, yeah, he probably just got boxed out by some of these shares, I guess. Dame probably took a lot away from him here. I'm surprised we didn't get a little bit more of him, though. 93 is correct. I'm not surprised that he didn't come up like crazy at 93, 4.69 points per dollar. I'm pretty surprised we didn't get more De'Aaron Fox in this DraftKings sim at 5.37 points per dollar. 8,300 is a very low price for De'Aaron Fox if he's going. Last time out, 41.4 FanDuel points in 35.9 minutes on the season, 1.35 DraftKings, 1.32 FanDuel. That's a great buy. Really curious about I'm going to look at that. Just giving it a look. He is in one of the top, call it 15 lineups. At least one. I saw him like right off the bat there. Actually, he's in the top overall lineup, just at the guard only spot. And then he's at the point guard in another lineup in the top 15. So, I mean, he's easily capable of hitting the board. So that's telling that he can take you that high, even though he's not hitting it with frequency. The 0.84 in top ones versus the 2.4% in winners. And he's getting you really high up the top of the board, given his extreme value price. And I think if you just reran this sim a few times, or if a couple things change on the slate with around some of the value guys, or like if Kyrie doesn't go, you'll see a lot more De'Aaron Fox. Like, where's Kyrie? Kyrie right here. De'Aaron Fox would probably take all those shares away from Kyrie. Well, I mean, of course, if Kyrie doesn't go, they're going to all go away from Kyrie somewhere, but he would probably soak up a bunch of them if those became available. He is actually looking, I mean, it's a better point per dollar play, 8,800 for 45 versus 8,300 for 44. I'm surprised at this result for De'Aaron Fox. But looking at the sim lineups, which we'll pull up later, it really is like it's Jordan Poole and Drew in the top two in the point guard spot. And it's Dame, Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell, Dame a few times, Kyrie a few times, Dame, a couple of the value plays, but it's a lot of spendy guys in the pure point guard spot. And then it does look like we're getting a lot of double pay-ups among these high-end point guards. So that's where, remember what I was saying before when we landed on whoever it was over here, I was saying, there is a group of very high-end point guards up here where you might not be paying down at this position as much. Seems like more justification in paying down at the shooting guard position, pay up at point guard and guard. Like a lot of these lineups are Drew, Fox, Drew, Dame, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie, Dame, Jalen Brunson, Dame Levine, Kyrie, Dame. There's a lot of spend between those two spots. That's DraftKings. We'll jump over and we'll look at them. Dan Lillard's at the top of the board. He's the one spelled Damian Lillard. With the big numbers. Trey's here. Oh, Trey picked up some deli fried chicken. Oof, love it. You know what's the best? And I mean, I love some good like Hollywood fried chicken or like, A+ lucky best #1 star, fried chicken type, fast foodie, just, lunch counter type places. Not even lunch counter, just like the takeout place where it's just the counter and like the pictures of the stuff. It's half Chinese restaurant on one side, half fried chicken place on the other side. There's literally one across the street. I love that. But some of the best fried chicken I've ever had in my life, and maybe it's like an 80s thing and they don't cook it the same way anymore because of whatever restrictions, like with McDonald's fries. Apparently they used to use like beef oil and now they're not allowed to or whatever. Maybe it's the same thing. But the fried chicken that they used to have at the A&P in the 80s when I was a kid, my mom would bring home like a 9-piece fried chicken or whatever for us for dinner. Oh my God, was that good fried chicken. Don't know what it was. So good. These joints can't compete. But these places are good. Solid second. Beef tallow, there it is. Yeah, that's the Trey points out. A&P, I'm telling you, Beantown. I don't know what it was, man. I still do. I mean, there are some the what's the one down the hill here? Whatever those the supermarkets that have like the hot counters with the bagged fried chicken, they're still not bad. Some of them are good, but nothing competes with that A&P fried chicken from when I was a kid. Like I said, could just be one of those things where like you're a kid. What do you know? Could definitely be an 80s thing. LeBron James game time decision. Anthony Davis probable. Or Lyndon Baines Johnson game time decision. Mom is eating that right now. Tiz is here. What's up, Tiz? Tiz is making some chili. Woo. Apparently some cold weather. Weather calls for chili where Tiz is. Not bad. I go for some chili, too. I make a mean chili. I think I've told you guys before. We used to do like an annual chili cook-off. The Chili Con Carnival. Won it a few times. Make a pretty solid chili. It was ridiculous, though, because it would be like, you go out to make like the big full pot of chili for everybody. It was like $150 worth of ingredients would go into this thing. I'd stay up all night the night before cooking it and just like leave it on. Inevitably, like I'd be smoking and like, I'd be watching movies and stuff while it's just going away on the over on the stove, and I'd fall asleep for a while. I'd wake up and be like, oh shit, needs to stir. You like break up that top. But, oh man, so good. So good. Matthew Patterson's making some beer cheese soup. That just sounds delicious. Love it. Mama got some wedges. Assume little potato wedges. Is that what we're talking? That's what I'm guessing. Everybody went nuts for those Popeyes chicken sandwiches a couple years ago. Those are good. Don't get me wrong. Very, very good. And then like a lot popped up in like different chicken places around here, or different like bars and stuff all started doing their versions of it. And I actually like a lot of those better, because you're just getting like, you're getting bar food, so you're getting a little bit of an upgrade in like your chicken and whatnot. But those Popeyes ones are pretty solid. Out of like the fast food joints, I think theirs is the best, but I don't actually think that their chicken is the best. Like they're just fried, they're straight up fried chicken. I think I like KFC's a little bit better, the actual like fried chicken, if I have to have the fast food fried chicken, but I haven't had that in a while. Popeyes, I had too many experiences where it just didn't agree with me. I don't know if it was like undercooked or if it was like something about the Cajun seasoning or whatever it was, but it's just like, yeah, some of the time it doesn't really agree with me great. Just the like actual fried chicken. Again, this chicken sandwiches I never had that issue with. Never had a bunch of mediocre. Matthew Patterson nails it. Popeyes requires you to smoke 18 bowls and then a toilet within 24 minutes afterward. That's about right. Anyway, looking down this board, a lot of like are who they are types. Tyus Jones, give you a little bit of value at 5,800. Playable part, lands in top lineups a handful of the times. Not impossible to get him there on either site. Sub 10%, but playable. Shaden Sharp lands that way. Lands a little better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, about double the amount of time in top lineups. He's really the biggest site-to-site difference once we get halfway down the board. Like yesterday, we saw a ton of guys that were showing more value on FanDuel. It's not really that way today. A lot of same here. Kevin Huerter, 18% of the time. 0.92 FanDuel points per minute, 0.95 DraftKings points per minute. Less relevant for 58 shooting guard only than he is at 55 dual position on FanDuel. Kind of just a flex piece, I think, for Kevin Huerter here. But not a bad play. Flex piece meaning like, being able to move him back and forth at a cheap price between those two positions. A lot of action just kind of at the top of the board here, though, with these clear-cut plays. Beauchamp not really landing on FanDuel. 6%, it's not an impossible play by any means, but at 41 and small forward only, not nearly the value play that he is on the DraftKings slate for 35 dual position. Outside of him, everybody's just kind of guys playing their usual role, guys who are stars. Dame Lillard in a featured role with no Giannis. Dame is the key component right now in the guard spot, and then you just spread out between a lot of these guys. But a little bit clear-cut, I think, at guard today. Clear-cut in that there are a lot of good plays among these guys who project like who they are. But there are, again, don't get me wrong, some plays down board. Like there's a fairly clear mid-board here where any of these 8s, 9s, 10s are playable and can get into lineups that fair amount of the time. If you just do that across those guys, that's 144% of winning lineups in that sim include some version of one of these guys. So it's clear-cut who the best plays are, but there is a solid mid-board of playable types. 39 people hanging out on a Wednesday, 4:38. A lot of time here. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. Everything up on the site is free. Projections are free up on the site. We'll have them updated again after the show's over. Take a look through some of the forwards. Patty Williams showing a lot of value on both sites. 3,900 on DraftKings. Just a 22-point projection, just a .68 per minute player, but that cheapo price has him really keying in for some value here. 4,300 on FanDuel, small forward, power forward, 23-point projection. Last time out, 27 minutes, put up 34 FanDuel points. If he gives you that kind of production, that's going to be a killer play. Beauchamp pops up on the DraftKings side again, just because of the positioning, just because of the value. Not really relevant on FanDuel. Levert we touched on, looking like a big play on both sites. Just projected to be basically who he is. That game again has just a 219-point projection, or 219-point total. Actually, I got it right here. 218.5 now. 10.5-point spread in Cleveland's favor. But even if they get up and run away, I like these guys to basically fill in to where we need them to be. When I say these guys, I mean Karis LeVert and Donovan Mitchell. Danny we touched on in the guards spot. Or did we? No, I guess I mentioned him before when I was talking about it at the top of the show. That just targeting into that Washington and Dallas game, and especially when you get him at 5,700, 1.02 FanDuel points per minute. You do get these clunkers out of Denny, where he's just not that involved. 23.6 points in essentially the same amount of time that we're projecting him for tonight. That would be kind of disastrous at this $5,700 price. You need a significant amount more from him. But 1.04 DraftKings points per minute on the season. He's been getting it done. 5.21 points per dollar today at 6,200 over there. Lands him in top lineups 30% of the time over there, 45% of the time on FanDuel for 5,700 at both forward spots. Just looking like another key piece of like good mid-range chalk. Levine we talked about. That is Evan Mobley, another piece of the Cavs, looking pretty solid. Landing in top lineups. This is where we run into how many pieces of the Cavs do I really want out of a 218-point game. And then you run into also having to take some of Portland on the other side of that because like Jeremy Grant, if you're playing on FanDuel anyway, looks pretty good. So you're probably going to come up with, just in a pure run, a fair amount of lineups that have 2 or 3 pieces of that game. And it's not the best total on the board. But again, it's not necessarily always about the exclusively that total. Just player rates, like the rates, the projections, everything that you're seeing here is about what that total is. But everything that we see here and here in these results is about what is already accounting for what that total is. So these guys within a 218-point game, I mean, it's, they land in better lineups when they trend upward with their standard deviations and whatnot, but in this game environment, this is how heavily they're hitting the board. So getting to a few of them probably makes sense. I think I probably would want 3 at the most from these Cavs, and even that feels a little bit strained, but there are a few very good pieces from that game coming up. Paolo Banchero, more on the FanDuel slate, 7,900 power forward and small forward over there. A little bit less so on DraftKings, but still relevant. 20% of the time in winners on DK, 7,700 power forward only. Might be a little bit of just the positioning that's creating that difference, that 10% difference in winners. Just not having the ability to flex him out to the small forward spot might be killing that value a little bit. And you're probably getting it in exchange for some of these, like probably getting some Patty Williams in that spot. I'm sure in those lineups where I was reading Kyrie and Dame in the 2 guard spots, most of those probably had Patty Williams in the power forward. So that's probably where you're dropping some of these shares, because he is cheaper on DK, 7,700 versus 79 on FanDuel. And he's a high-end play, 1.11 DraftKings points per minute, 5.85 DraftKings points per dollar. I think you're just sacrificing some of your Banchero to some of these cheaper plays above. But he's a very strong play from here. just given who he is and what his value is. Probably the top play in that game overall. You get a cheap Torrey Craig, 28-minute projection, 4,200, small forward only on FanDuel, 10-12% of the time. A little bit more relevant for 4,000 on the DraftKings slate. Just another guy who, one of those cheap pieces. That said, 0.74 DraftKings points per minute, 25.4 on the FanDuel scale in 22.5 minutes the other day. I think he's gotten there like one of the times that we've used him so far this season. I don't love the option in a low-end game. Kyle Anderson, mid-teens on both sites, trending up to 20% in top one, 17.75% in winners on DraftKings for 4,600. I don't mind that as much. I think I'd rather find another $600 and try and pay for Kyle Anderson than Torrey Craig, for example, between those two guys who, percentage-wise in winners, look basically the same there. Not that I trust Kyle Anderson. It's a weird thing to say that I trust Kyle Anderson more than anybody, but you're getting a little bit more current year point per minute production out of him, and we've just had more, I think, more ongoing, clear demonstration of what his actual point per minute value is. So I think I like Kyle Anderson a little bit better in that spot. He's coming up a little bit better on FanDuel, which I'm happy about. Corey Kispert in that targetable Dallas-Washington game. Kyle Kuzma in that game. Timmy Hardaway in that game. All three of those guys are interesting. Kuz, a very key part of the FanDuel slate. Kispert, not really. And then Timmy Hardaway, a decent option on the FanDuel slate. And then on DraftKings, all three of those guys just basically into the mid-teens. But all three of them fairly relevant. I think I would want a couple of pieces of that game in a lot of lineups. All right, speaking of that game, though. Don't remember after we were talking about all the expensive options, yeah. Luka all the way down here. 1.16, 1.20, but a 61-point projection, 60-point projection basically on FanDuel for 12 grand. Same results in terms of the sims, but just again, as I've stressed a bunch of times, and hopefully is something that's clear as we talk about these things. Luka is the kind of guy. These are the guys that you're saving that money for. These are the guys that you're rostering those building blocks to get to. So there's never anything wrong with putting just the raw scoring potential and the crazy ceiling of Luka, especially in a game with a monster total, by far the highest total on the board. It makes some sense to put him into some lineups here. So he kind of, the general upside kind of defies the sim, if that makes sense. Not saying that the sim is wrong. In these lineups, this is how many times he landed in winners, but I'm saying he is a clear-cut, raw upside, raw ceiling, and raw scoring kind of a play. And at a certain point, we do want to book raw scoring. Back to the forward spot here. That was just me curious about where Luka landed in those sims because of how much that game looks strong. This is ownership. Dame's going to be crazy, crazy popular across both sides. Everybody that we've talked about from Cleveland and Washington is going to be pretty popular. Levine, Patty Williams are going to be popular. Where the hell is he? There he is. Luka Garza came up. Yeah, lower mid single digits type ownership for Dame. Or for Luka, rather. Not uninteresting, just in a raw scoring sense in that game. Getting back to this. Where were we? We talked about Paolo. We were here. We talked about Kuzma and Kispert, Timmy Hardaway. Cat, just kind of looking like Cat. 10% of the time, never really crests beyond this. Never really goes that far under it. 50 points in 41.7 minutes the last time out. Even this, like in a raw scoring sense, 50 points is fine. Especially at 8,100, you'll take that. It's well above 5 points per dollar. But it's still not great, especially because he played 41 points in basically 42 minutes. We're looking for more than that from Karl Anthony Towns. 1.12 FanDuel points per minute on the season, 1.16 DraftKings points. A clear ceiling there. The price is fine. He's landing in top lineups 10% of the time on both sites. Just is who he is, though. Pascal Siakam landing a little bit more on FanDuel, but sub 5 points per dollar on both sites today. Just in the single digits in results on the DraftKings slate. A big, healthy projection of 37 minutes. Put up a monster 65.7 FanDuel points in the exact same amount of minutes the last time out. So has the ability to go half again on top of this fantasy score on any given slate. Definitely playable, definitely rosterable at the power forward spot on FanDuel. Power forward and center, despite the multi-position, not coming up as frequently because he's 400 more on DraftKings against that cap. Toumani Camara, I don't really see it here unless we get a big uptick in minutes again, but I've got him at 26. 25.6 minutes last time out, put up 20.5 FanDuel points, joining the starting lineup. I'm not wild about that one. 0.68 FanDuel points per minute on the season, 0.66 DraftKings. Even if he picks up another 2-3 minutes, that one I don't love. The price is fine. He would, if that was the case, trend upward in the DraftKings sims just because of how cheap he is. Shaden Sharp, 15% of the time on FanDuel, half that on the DraftKings slate for 78. Tobias Harris will have more to do. If Embiid doesn't go, he'll probably pick up a little bit, just in terms of rates. Not going to give him any more beyond 37 minutes, I don't think. But in terms of rates, he'll probably see a little bit of an uptick, but I don't think he crests much beyond these numbers. 6,900 on FanDuel at both forward spots, 66 on DraftKings, both forward spots. Maybe a little bit more valuable over there, but not a great option. Julius Randle against Atlanta, just 5% of winners on FanDuel, 6% of winners on DraftKings. Chris Boucher, just because he's 4,100, lands in some FanDuel lineups. 41 at power forward only on DraftKings, not so much. Again, any of these guys could make it, obviously. That swath of guys right there, as low as they are, represents 92.7% of winners at the forward positions. Hopefully everybody realizes that's not 92.7% out of 100, right? Multiple forward positions. I think that's clear. A lot of single digits on some more star caliber guys down here. I would never begrudge anybody any Anthony Edwards, LeBron James, Jason Tatum shares. Roster those guys at will. Just know that where they sim out is in the 1%. But those 1% do win you tournaments. That's why you go to those stars. Again, it's the exact same conversation as with Luka. You just can, if you get to that point where I've got one spot left in my lineup and I've got 10-1 and I can put LeBron in there, or I can spend less and put a lesser guy in there, then you can make those clear-cut plays, and the 1% of the time that they do land for you, you're making a hell of a lot of money. So they're playable in tournaments for sure, just on their raw scoring potential. Rates-wise, Sims-wise, there's a lot of better options positionally. But again, a lot of these guys up at the top, the 39s, the 35s, to a lesser extent the 6s and 7s, help you pay for the star caliber types. KD is on that list as well. With everybody coming back, it's kind of a mishmash right now in that Phoenix rotation about where the ball's going to go, what it's going to look like exactly. None of those guys hit the board really hard. Beal, Booker, KD. Stephen Leibowitz chimes in a very small sample, but Dame's usage is 33% with no Giannis, then Portis, Brolo, and Beauchamp. Yeah, it was Dame, Portis, and my top two, and then Brolo, in terms of just like how I immediately attacked that when that news broke. Yeah, if we're creating value in that Boston rotation, that does get more interesting for sure. If you get no Jalen, or even more to the point, if you get no Jalen and KP, that would really create a lot of value there. So I think you would see a little bit of potential out of Derek White. You would obviously see Drew and Jason Tatum take a bit of a step forward from the guys that are already in the rotation. I imagine Al Horford would get a start there. He would probably show some value. Then we'd be looking at what, Hauser? Probably Hauser stepping into some minutes there. And then they've got just that short, tight, condensed rotation anyway. But there'd be a handful of minutes laying on the ground for somebody to pick up. But yeah, that would create some more playable options in Boston for sure. As it would on the Philly side if Embiid doesn't go. You've already got some options on Philly. It's going to be an uglier game, it seems like, than that should be. That should be a really good showdown game, but maybe we'll get it later in the season when it matters more. Yeah, you can see, you mentioned Beauchamp. Again, much more important to the DraftKings slate the way it's looking right now. But that's really because he costs $3,500 and he's projected for 26 minutes. You take the name off the jersey, it's just about rate, minutes, and price at that point, and position to a degree. 5.51 DraftKings points per dollar. On FanDuel, 4,100, but small forward only just kind of limits the amount of exposure you need to. I like Bobby Portis a lot, though, for this slate, both sites. This just seems like one of those clear-cut, just go to Bobby Portis day, good chalk Bobby Portis kind of days. I don't know what his ownership looks like when I say that. I assume it's fairly high, but that was as soon as I saw Giannis scratch, or Giannis out, I went, ding, Bobby Portis day. That's just one of the automatics to me, and he's at a good price for it, too. When he's getting regular minutes, he is getting regular minutes, don't get me wrong. 22 minutes a game in 10 games this season. But when he's getting regular, bigger minutes, the price goes up fairly quickly because he's an aggressively good points per minute player. But when you catch him at the beginning of that, like if you had multiple games with Giannis out or something, when you catch him at the beginning of that first game, not that this is the beginning of a trend of Giannis being out, but it's always a good spot. And that is what we're dealing with today. Let's look at center. Oops. Not center space, just center. And there he is at the top of the board again. When you go to center plays, easily the top option on DraftKings at 33% in winners, 33.7 in top ones. Ties with Evan Mobley for FanDuel winners, 29.7, just barely edges him out, 29.7 versus 29.38. Mobley beats him out in top 1%ers. There's some options. Actually, the DraftKings board has a couple here in Brolo, which makes a ton of sense. I have no issues playing Brolo and Portis together. And then 25% of the time for Mobley. So 3 really strong plays, DraftKings-wise. These two guys soaking up a little bit more than Brolo does on the FanDuel slate. Probably some of that is because they're both power forward eligible. And then on FanDuel, you do get plays like Goga. 26-ish FanDuel point projection in 24 minutes. Pretty realistic. He's a 1.2 FanDuel point per minute player so far this season. We've seen that he's been a very good point per minute player over time. So he lands in a fair amount of FanDuel lineups. It's just slightly more depth right here, just between these 4 guys, than on DraftKings. What is that? That comes out to 53% total, 13.49% average. On DraftKings, those 4 guys, it comes out to 39.5% total, 9.9% average. So again, slightly more depth here between Goga, Karl Anthony Towns, Jared Allen, Pascal Siakam. Most of those guys probably are picking up that value at the power forward spot. Then some interesting tournament options, like Mitch can always give you a day for 5,900. He projects out pretty well, 5.05 FanDuel points per minute, 5.05 FanDuel points per dollar. On the season, he's a 0.94 FanDuel points per minute player, 0.89 on DraftKings. A little bit more upside with the stocks on the FanDuel slate. But any given slate tournament upside at the center spot, disappointed last time out, 33 minutes is a big total for Mitch, just gave us 20.7 FanDuel points. Typically plays about the 29-30 minutes that we've got him projected for. KP, if he goes, looks fine, but just kind of KP-ish. Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, just sitting here. But both of those guys fall into that category of they're just primetime stars. They're big end players that you can pay up for. And getting to either one of those guys, any given slate, not really a mistake. I would expect on FanDuel especially, I'll see a little bit more AD, given the power forward positioning. Landing at 6%. That FanDuel, AD on FanDuel, out of all 4 spots for those 2 guys, is the best play. But either one of them on either side is perfectly fine. DeAndre Ayton not showing nearly the value that he showed last night. It was 2% of the time in winners on both sites, 7,600 on FanDuel, 72 on DraftKings. Downboard, nobody. Nothing really interesting down here on either site. Randall, power forward mostly. These Cleveland guys, Cleveland's kind of looking like Toronto looked the other day. We're figuring out the right couple of guys out of these, basically 5 guys from Cleveland that kind of look good in kind of a low-end game. Is probably going to be pretty critical to this slate. Just because of how frequently Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert are popping up. So really it's the 4 of them? Who was the 5th one that I was thinking of? I feel like there's a 5th one, but figuring out that the right plays from Cleveland or just getting to the, have a bunch of them across a bunch of lineups, but just getting to the right chop is probably going to be fairly critical to this slate, just given how it looks right now. Could completely change with news, obviously. And we do have news coming, I'm sure. We saw in Milwaukee how Drew can step up when it starts out. Yeah, I mean, Drew's just an excellent player. So, yeah, any given slate, I have no issues with that. And the idea that he could step into a little bit of what Jaylen Brown does makes total sense to me. I don't have issue going to Drew at all if that becomes the situation. In fact, I like him a lot. Let's put everybody back on the board here real quick. We'll take a look at Boston. See, I mean, as is, we're getting Drew in 16.8% of winners on DraftKings for 6,900 across both guard spots, 14.3% at the point guard only on FanDuel. So that's just going to go up pretty significantly. Not that his minutes are going to change dramatically, like it might pick up a minute and change just with the scrappy minutes that'll be on the table if you get no Jaylen. But he'll pick up some value. So that'll trend north. Derek White will trend north a little bit from, again, already good rates for him. Same kind of a thing. Horford, not really showing much right now. I don't think Horford takes like a huge leap. He's going to go from like 24 to 28. I like Al Horford in spots, but I don't know how good it lands today. Might be a little better. Well, I don't know. Because he's got multi-position on DraftKings, but he's 55. That's pretty prohibitive. You can see where he's projected now is just 3.82. That's going to be a lot to overcome for him to be able to show value. Like if he goes to, like he needs this projection to change to like 28 to become even. This would land him in maybe 5-ish, 8-ish%. So I don't know that we're going to love the Horford play there. On FanDuel, I could see it picking up a little bit more value if he steps into starting minutes. And then I assume we get, uptick for Hauser. Probably an uptick for Cornette. And then whoever downboard that's not on this, I can look at the full rotation. Is there anybody obvious that would step into minutes? Is Brissett back to being healthy? He missed a couple, I think. Or just didn't play. I haven't looked into him. He's not on the injury report. Yeah, he just didn't play last time. 5 minutes again before that. 8 minutes again before that. Delano Banton is on this team now. 6 minutes, 4 minutes, those 2 games. Svi is on this team. He might get those minutes. I could see that. I'm just talking about like the 8 scrap minutes that'll be on the table. Just trying to figure out where they'll go. But the key players, I think it'll just be kind of a consolidation around some of the key players that are already looking good for Boston, rather than like a total wild card coming in out of left field. But keep an eye on it. It'll obviously land in projections. Let's take a look at some lineups, and then we will get out of here and get some lineups built. Oh, it was a really good slate last night, too. I loved the amount of time that I got off with in terms of ending the show and having a lot of time to build out lineups and run some sims. The news broke pretty well. Like, I wasn't frantic for getting news updated. Everything worked out kind of nicely. I just had some really, really good lineups. Had some really good chasers. Was in the top 10 fairly late. It's funny, though. I feel like especially that last game, that Lakers game, just seems like it went on forever. I forget what time it started. Must have been a 10:30 start. And it just like started chiseling away. So the top 10s ended up in the teens somewhere. But a couple really good lineups. It was a fun chase, fun sweat last night. Where the hell? There it is. Couldn't find the tab. So, per our pals over at Ace Mind, of course running with our projections. So these are the ones I was looking at before while we were talking about DraftKings. This is the DK sim going up against the big field, 31,000. A couple interesting smaller tournaments up today as well. You can sim those on Ace Mind as well. A little bit different results if you go against the smaller fields. But you can just see what I was calling out before when I was talking about this. I mean, for one, we were just talking about Drew Holiday, and this is with Jalen playing. You can see he's already in the top overall lineups. But Drew with De'Aaron Fox, Jordan Poole with Dame, Drew with Dame, Dame with Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie with Dame, Dame with Zach LaVine. A couple others in there defied my example. Jalen Brunson and Dame is kind of pay-up-ish. But a lot of pay-up between the point guard spot and the guard spot on DraftKings. Plenty of Bobby Portis through the power forward spots. Or the forward spots. Good amount of Paolo Banchero, which I'm happy about. We talked about him. Landing in some of the power forward spots. Landing in some of the forward spots. Little mixers of Torrey Craig. A lot of Patty Williams. That was another one. Remember I said if you think about the Drew and Dame, the Kyrie and Dame and Patty Williams, those are going to be a lot of common constructions around those guys. So it's interesting. It does appear to be like a lot of lineups that break around this decision. I keep forgetting I can't highlight just one of those columns. I didn't just resort that today. Oh, these are different. I think that was sorted by win rate. What does this originally sort to? I don't know. So that top one's got Drew, De'Aaron Fox, and Donovan Mitchell in it. So yeah, like I was saying, a lot of these, you're getting these value guys. But I think a lot of it's going to break around that second guard decision. Like you get a clear pay up in the point guard spot. That's kind of a no-brainer. Just based on how these sims are running. And then if you pay up in the guard spot, you're going to a couple of the fairly clear value guys. If you make a different decision there, you get kind of a more balanced approach and a more balanced looking lineup. Like Beauchamp here gets you to a lineup that's got both Portis and AD in it. You've got Patty Williams and Kyle Anderson as like mid-range value plays. You've got Danny and Jordan Poole who both look solid out of that game. Makes it a little bit more balanced. This guard spot on DraftKings seems like a real inflection point for this slate. This one's interesting. Luka, LaVine, and Donnie Mitchell. But with Kispert, Niang, Patty Williams, Clint Capella's an oddball in that one, and Beauchamp. A lot of Starsy Scrubsy there. So depending on what you do with this position, it really makes it seem like it goes either more balanced or more Starsy Scrubsy. But plenty of value to do either one, and it seems like there's going to be more emergent value later on this slate. Just looking at some of the results here. The cash won. That top lineup, pretty frequent winner. I mean, pretty frequent winner, and it wins 0.36% of the time in Sims, but top 1%, 8.52% of the time, very solid ROI marks, and $502 average cash winner on your $15 buy-in. Not bad. If you're just looking at cash, you get different results, obviously. I know some people out there do just play, I'm just looking at cash, you just want to chip away. A little bit of a different approach. Not something I love looking at, but we can pull it up. I don't dislike these lineups. I mean, Dame, Beauchamp, Jaden McDaniels is an oddball to pop in there. In the top 2 as well. Danny Avdia in a lot of those. Bobby Portis. There's not that much differentiated construction between these top cashers and top winners, obviously. I think more of the changing in trends probably comes more down in this territory. Let's jump over to the FanDuel slate. Or not. Thoughts on moving off Dame? Nah, I don't like the idea of moving off Dame, Jake. Unless something dramatically changes, I think I'm going to be filthy with Dame Lillard shares tonight. Good chalk is good chalk in basketball. It's just, you just go to it. Especially with a guy like that. I have no issues. Could go out and turn in a clunker at a rough shooting night, if I remember correctly, 2 nights ago. Or the last time, whenever the last time they played was. But overall, yeah, it's no issues there. No, Mamba, I don't think Kuzma's out. I don't know why this isn't giving me back the dashboard. Something funky probably on my end. Can I get back to those DraftKings results then? They might be running an upgrade on the back end or something. Hey, sorry guys, we might not be able to see the FanDuel results. Speaking of the guys over at Ace Mine, though, they reached out. We're going to try and jump on and do a show together at some point. Probably for NFL. That was what Blaine mentioned anyway. So stay tuned for that. We'll obviously have a bunch from them. They'll be able to take us through a little bit more about the sim tool, the back end. Oh, all the way out. So that must be something. They must have just pushed an update on the back end. So we'll bail out of here, and we'll just wrap things up. But no, Mamba, unless it just broke, as you were asking that, Kuzma is in as far as I know, and was looking very, very good. He was one of the key plays that we touched on a few times from that game, in a game that we definitely want to target. Kuz was one of the top players overall on the whole operation right here. 31. Call it 32% of the time in winners on FanDuel. A little less relevant, 13% of winners on DraftKings for 81. Yeah, I just think you can see that here, Mamba. Right? Danny's all the way up here. Just a little bit more frequent, just based on some points per dollar advantage across both sites. But Kuzma rates out very, very well. 1.18 FanDuel points per minute, 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. But Kispert's here. Kispert, again, just a DK play because he's only 4,000. A lot less relevant to FanDuel. Jordan Poole, just kind of because he is Jordan Poole, and 0.98 DraftKings points, 0.96 FanDuel points. One of the more frustrating players in the league to watch play the game. Did you see that clip of him in the timeout the other day? It was really, somebody put in a bunch of animations of just pointing out what he was doing, and it was yelling at his teammate, throwing his towel, not looking at the clipboard, and just on and on. And then at the end of the timeout, just as they're supposed to go back out, you see him kind of taking a peek at the clipboard to see what the play was supposed to be. Frustrating. But yeah, a lot of that game is going to be important. Just that's a critical game in terms of what the game total looks like. It might not all go to the stars. You might see Dallas light up Washington, really run away from them, score a bunch of points, but then a lot of the guys come out of the game. Kyrie already banged up apparently coming into this one. You never know what's going to happen with him. But 245.5 point total is very difficult to ignore. So I think it's clear cut. You're going to have a couple of guys in many of your lineups from that game. A lot of guys from that game. A lot of guys from the Cleveland and Portland game that doesn't have a good total at the end of the night, but just has a lot of good points per dollar looking plays. and then everything else that kind of just falls in between. But I think that's like, if you talk about the bird's nest of the sticks and things that you collect up, into which you can drop some stars and some good plays, I think a lot of it comes out of the Washington side, and a lot of it comes out of the Cleveland side tonight. It's just a matter of getting those two pieces right, and then obviously landing on the right guys to fall into the open spots around that at pretty good salaries. It's going to be an interesting one. And then obviously there's the Patty Williamses from Chicago's of the world, and the other guys that we saw at the value spots. But that's going to be it. Hopefully we get Ace Mine back in the next couple of minutes. I'm going to reach out to those guys if it doesn't pop back up. But like I said, I'm sure that was just them pushing an update on the back end that I just happened to run into timing-wise. And we'll keep an eye on that. Any questions, pop into Discord. I'll get projections updated in the next little bit. I got an injury report coming out in about 15 minutes, so we'll wait on that. Let Joker out, get him fed. Update projections between 5:30 and 6. Anything that changes, we'll be on top of. Other than that, guys, good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Come on back tomorrow. We'll be doing probably a combined football basketball show again tomorrow. And hopefully we'll have our new graphics up. That'll be maybe my project for tomorrow morning, is making sure that I have those aligned correctly and looking good, because I'm sure some work went into them. But with that, guys, thank you very much. Hit the like button one more time. Or don't hit it again if you've already hit it. But if you haven't, hit the like button. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle, and I'll see you tomorrow. Adios.